I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, July 16th meeting of the Wilmington Planning Commission. I would ask if we could all please rise, remove any non-military caps, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Attorney, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I'm going to read an abbreviated procedure statement tonight because we are kind of on an abbreviated, agenda tonight. So, Planning Commission advises City Council on applications for rezoning, land developments, code amendments, street closures, and long-range plans and policies. The Commission holds legislative hearings, meaning that anyone wishing to speak can do so. The Commission issues a recommendation based on consistency of the request with the intent and purpose of the Land Development Code and consistency of a request with the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan and other relevant adopted plans and policies. Presentation of items. All matters requiring Commission action shall be presented to the Commission by the staff and the applicant. However, tonight we do not have any legislative items on the agenda that will require a staff presentation. At that point, I'm going to move on and to the approval of the minutes from last week. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? I would ask for any corrections, adjustments.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? I have a second. Second from Commissioner Jones. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Any procedural items we're going to take? We have one item of new business. Actually, it's old business. And it's my understanding that the applicant has requested to continue this item. So if the applicant would come forward and state the reason for the, for the request, and then we'll take care of that.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Amy Schaefer on behalf of the applicant for the street closure of a portion of Seabreeze in Benton. As you know, last month we were here, and we have been working with staff since that time, hoping to come to some kind of agreement or resolution or obtain staff support. I think we're close, but we just need a little bit more time. So we would ask that this be continued to the August 6th meeting. 6th. And I did verify with my client, we do think that we can have everything wrapped up by that meeting date.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant before we rule? Commissioner Kofer?
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. One thing, since this has been continued twice and we understood it was going to be driving out on that property and down those roads, that's okay to do site visit.
Yes.
It's all residential back there, isn't it?
Yes, it's all residential, and right now it's public. It's not really anywhere to turn around, and it's a dirt road. But
is it,
yes.
People, as far as coming out there just to look and see what we're talking about?
Oh, yeah, that's
not a problem.
Absolutely fine.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, I need a motion to address the applicant's request to move to August.
I make a motion to accept the request for continuance to August meeting.
Motion to continue. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you.
That concludes the regular agenda of old business and new business. So we'll move to items from the commission. So are there any items that any commissioner wants to bring up for the group or for the staff? Okay, seeing none. Items from the staff. Mr. Chambers.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. This is an update of where we're at with the Land Development Code Amendment for replacing special use permits with conditional zoning. This is a brief overview of where we've been. We had a first public hearing with this commission back in April. You can see how we progressed. Tonight's would be a staff update based on the last working group session and the city council meeting feedback we received in June. The next step would be the public hearing with city council in August. Original proposal here was to eliminate special uses and special use permits that allow these uses by conditional zoning. Reminder, there is currently 22 special uses. 9 of those are specific to historic districts. When this item went to city council, we got some feedback from council at that time. This is the comments we've received, keeping the permits as an option in the code, keeping critical community support uses in the code. The mayor specifically referenced the Healing Place, which is a group home residential use. Reduce the number of uses requiring a special use permit to the fewest number possible, and then identifying some special uses that could potentially be permitted by right with prescribed conditions. So staff took that feedback back and updated the proposal. The proposal that we took to the working group maintains the SUP process that limits special uses and special use permits to the commercial and industrial districts and allows several of these uses by right with prescribed conditions. The boxes in the table that are highlighted in red are the uses that were discussed at that working group and recommended to be changed from conditional zoning to a use by right with prescribed conditions. That's the update. The next step would be city council next month.
And just to reiterate to everybody, Councilman Collier, myself, and Commissioner Collier, myself and Commissioner Jones met with, there was a group of a couple citizens, one of the land use attorneys that we always see, professional, what is Brad? Is he an engineer?
He's a planner.
He's a planner. And then the city attorneys was represented, and then Ms. Painter and Mr. Chambers. So we had, I think, as diverse a group as we were going to get. And I think we took the whole 2 hours scheduled to go through it. So just as a reminder to everybody, that was the group we went away, and I thought we had a good open discussion. So I'm sorry, Brian, go ahead. I just wanted to reiterate to everybody here.
That's all we have as staff.
So Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Brian, for all your work in these breakout groups. So I do have several questions because it seems to me that what we initially voted on was a change in process, a change in mechanics, a change from special use permits to CZ. And that went up to council and was then pushed back to the Planning Commission. And here we are with the update that's being presented tonight. Will this and these changes not come back in front of us for a public hearing and more comments or debate? It seems that it's going straight to council.
It would be going straight to council. That was council's direction at that meeting, is to not go back for a public hearing, but to get input from this group. And that was the nexus for the working group that was established.
Because we're going now, when you look at a body of work and you go, well, these items were on this table of use, were some other advisory board, some other potentially elected official voted those in for special use permit. A change in process is one thing, but then I understand the intent to try to make as much permitted by as a C, conditioned with conditions. The one that glares out to me, though, is courtyard development in R15. And I see that it was C at R10, R7, and R5. But to go with that one from SUP straight to staff level, administratively, approved by right, that's a pretty significant change. That's no longer a process change. That's no longer the mechanics of we go from A to B. To get to A, to go from A to B, we go through a special use permit or we go through a conditional rezoning. Now we're going to get to A to B, we do it at the administrative level. And I understand that everyone must have agreed to that at the breakout meeting or the ad hoc committee meeting that was formed. It just, that one in particular just seems like a pretty significant detour from what we were initially assigned.
I would say that we didn't all agree to, at the ad hoc committee, the ones that were being kept in.
Say again?
The three that are suggested, I don't think we had a vote or talked about what was moving forward. I mean, that was staff that presented them taking those special uses out of it. I mean,
I think,
you're talking about ACE?
He's talking about courtyard. I think I
I
specifically
agree, that's
asked
very different, yeah.
to have it in as prescribed conditions, because courtyard has its own, it has its own classification in the code, it has its own restrictions. I didn't see it as an issue in R-15. That's my opinion, not everybody's, I'm sure. But
Well, and
I think I specifically asked for that myself.
That's where my curiosity comes up with a discussion on this, because again, I think that what I understood our assignment from council was to make a mechanics change, make a process change, and now we're kind of going a step beyond that. So now it becomes a new body of work. Follow-up questions would be on the conditions, are those freshly drafted? Are those new, or were those prescribed conditions, did they exist previously?
These are all existing prescribed conditions.
They were existing prescribed conditions?
That's correct.
Even if you were, on the table of uses as SUP, those prescribed conditions were the exact same as they were before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we're keeping special use permits. One thing we talked about in the previous discussion was with CZ, or in some cases with SUP, is there a timeline for those to, if there's no progress, will it revert back to the base zoning if nothing happens to the site?
A CZ is a conditional district. It would not expire. The applicant would have to make that request.
So the CZ is perpetual, it will not expire if no progress is made? Okay.
An SUP would expire if no progress is made, but then it's not, you're set to a timeline. So a CZ allows the applicant, the property owner, to hold on to the right to do that use in perpetuity. The SUP, they have to act within a certain period of time, or it goes away.
Okay. I think that's good to understand that the conditions were pre-established, and they didn't come out of that ad hoc committee, or they were there, because that would certainly give me some pause and reservation on just not being able to discuss it. If it is going to have some level of our stamp on it, our stamp of approval, that gives me significant reservations. And yeah, the only one right now that stands out as a major detour from what I think we were assigned was that courtyard development in R-15. And the other question I had was, but I think you answered it, Brian, would be the definition of athletic fields with the private recreation facilities and then the spas and health clubs. With spas and health clubs, it's okay to have athletic fields, but with private recreational facilities, it's not. Did all that exist? All that language existed previously?
No conditions changed, no definitions changed.
Okay.
so Brian, this is just how you get there, the process of how you get from A to B.
Right.
It's changed.
No uses, no changes to the
Right.
conditions that were
Right.
required for any of the uses.
Okay.
That's just injecting density in. No.
Commissioner Gopher, you still?
Sorry, yeah, I just with the courtyard development piece, I just feel like without, and correct me, because I'm learning on the job here, I've got no problem with my interpretation being incorrect. But it seems to me that we're injecting more density into R-15 without going through the SUP process or the CZ process, and it'd be approved by right if they met certain conditions. Is that a fair statement?
That was the suggestion that came out of the working group, yes.
Okay. All right.
Commissioner Adams, you're?
Yeah, we're talking about one of the, I'm going to say 5 cells that were altered after the group. For those of us that didn't participate, I'm curious, are there other specifics that you can share about why the feedback led for the other ones to be changed?
We didn't change these.
The other red ones, the other red boxes, those are all the ones, most of the ones I asked for. Major utility and public facilities, they were putting in as a conditional zoning. We were talking about UMX, RO. I mean, the districts that they were going in, they are necessary facilities that, why are they going to have to go through the process to get something that they need anyways? So there are prescribed conditions of where you put them and how you put them, but they're only limited in a few places.
So let's keep in mind that the reason the group got together was council had, and Linda and Brian, when Brian was presenting at the last council meeting on this topic, and the comment was made that they had already started down a path with a piece of work to try to address what council was saying. And that's when, the council said, look, let's have, the planning commission get with the staff and look at that body of work. We assembled, a group to look at that body of work. There was not an intention, I mean, unless something just drastically jumped out. What you see is pretty much that body of work. And I think for 2 hours we sat there and there was no violent objections one way or the other.
We didn't have a vote.
We weren't supposed to have a vote.
I know, and we still don't.
Yeah.
But I object to a lot of the uses that are on this table. And that doesn't matter. Yeah, someone can hear me say that. But
That's fine.
I think that as a body or entity, us spending 2 different meetings, 4 hours, talking about this, it went to council, it's coming back to us, and we don't have a vote, I mean, what does it really matter? And maybe they'll listen to us or not, but Trillium with Healing Place, NC Nourish, and those are nonprofits, and they're the feel-goods that our community like. There's a lot of these uses that need to continue to be in here. We didn't go through checking off anything in our meeting with staff. We just accepted what they presented to us, or not accepted, but it just went forward. I mean,
Well, the opportunity, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. The opportunity was there to discuss that,
and I discussed a lot of them
You
there.
did.
I don't know that
You
I
did.
was heard or not, but
Oh,
I
I'm
just,
sure you were.
I don't know why. I feel like there's an entity or somebody trying to do away with the SUP process, period. And I think this is, appeasing is not a good word. I think everything I've read through North Carolina government as to why the SUP process was established in 1969
Yeah.
is viable. And all of these were set up for some reason. I don't know when. Zonings for different properties have been established over the years. Mayfair was not zoned what it originally was, Center Point. There's a lot of different, and I mentioned it before, and I think Clifford used it in the city council meeting. It's a tool in the toolbox. That doesn't mean we need to cut the community out of it. We can figure out a way to let them speak, but, which the county does. So maybe we, city and the county need to get together. I've talked to Asheville, Buncombe County, Greensboro, Guilford County, and a lot of people handle it differently.
They do.
And that's
a fair statement.
It's, I don't think we strike something that's been a process and not really used that much. We've heard it presented that it's only been used, I mean, I go back to the numbers, but 5 times in the last 3 or 4 years.
See, I could make the same argument that says, just because of what you just said, an argument could be made that then this exercise should be a no-brainer for the infrequent use of the table. The other thing is, let's not lose sight of the fact, and Brian, keep me honest on the numbers, when the code was rewritten and then brought out on December 1st of '21, went from 59, if I have my numbers right, 59 special use permits down to the 22. So an exercise occurred at that point with the code rewrite to skinny this down. And personally, I look at this as nothing more than a continuation of that discussion.
And one that we don't have a vote on at this point, so that's.
Well, I think the vote, I think the realization is, Scott, it's been on council's agenda, what, 3 times? 2 or 3 times now?
Yeah, we continued it the first time.
Yeah, I understand. And I'm just trying to, point I'm trying to make is, you know, we collectively have done a piece of work, or looked at evaluated a piece of work, call it whatever you want. And, you know, as I talked to a couple members of council last night before, they asked me where we were. And I said, you know, we're going to, as a planning commission, we're going to look at the, you know, the outcome of the, you know, the staff's work and any suggestions made at the work session. But I said, in my opinion, council, you got three options. You can look at this in August and say, this makes sense. That's one option. Second option, you can modify what you see in front of you. Third option is you can say, we're not changing anything and move on. But I said, guys, my recommendation is you need to come to grips with where you want to go with this and move. Because, you know, it's, again, personal opinion, I just don't think it makes sense to come back here or back to the staff. I mean, those steps have been done.
Oh, I agree with that
Yeah.
statement, for sure.
So,
But I just think the way we lived 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and how we will live in 20 years in our future, we need to have processes and things that we can adapt to change to how we live. How I lived when I was raising the son is not how I live today, or where I choose to live.
yeah.
And so that's a personal thing with me, but our community that's listening has their personal circumstance.
Sure.
If they're raising 3 kids, or single, elderly, a lot of these come into play with this, a daycare, adult or child, entertainment, trade events, group homes, assisted living. Anyway, I'll let somebody else speak at this point. That's just how I feel.
That's fine. No.
Well, back to, you know, I think the premise of this is the discussion came down from the top that they wanted to change the process. And a lot of that comes down from 160D from the state. Advisory boards can no longer hear quasi-judicial, you know, topics. And everybody's trying to figure out how to navigate that. Special use permits, changing to CZ, that's just a keystroke change on process and the mechanics. When special use permits don't change to CZ and they change to C, then that's a horse of a different color. And I understand that the council that was the task. My only objection to this table right now would be courtyard development in R15. You notice on the whole left side of the table, everything is blue, except for that one, it's green. In all fairness to the table, R10, R7, and R5, they already were C. But they're also a much more dense zone. So we're talking about, you know, that's what I'm bringing up. That would be my concern. That is a by right now. No one needs to go through a special use permit, which previously the owner would need to have done that. They don't need to go through a conditional zoning. They would go to staff if they meet the conditions, and they can build by right. And, you know, that's a big change. But I get it. We're not here to vote on that, or really, I want to make sure that my objection's heard there on that one.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When you say that came from the top down, of what you think somebody wants, or what maybe, are you talking about the council?
Yes, my understanding is that we were charged with the task to study this because it was
It was
requested
referred
by.
back to us because they didn't want to make a decision.
I felt like from the original, the first time we heard this was based on the aftermath of the Holly Tree event, of the Holly Tree case.
I
And then
agree.
we were charged with the task to discuss it, deliberate it, debate it. We made a vote, it went up, it came back. But I'm not saying the first time, the first time is what I'm talking about, not the second time. It came down from council. This was their request for us to study as their advisory commission.
And I don't think as a commission, we've really studied it. Staff, and nothing against staff, because I think they've done a great job, but they've presented us with stuff. I've studied it, made comments, but there again, we have no vote. I mean, so it doesn't, I don't know what our studying is really helping with. I think there was an objective initially, and it was a knee-jerk reaction because of the pickleball incident taking 4 hours. I think some have backed off that since then, and that's all I'll say. But anyway, I'll be quiet and let other people talk, sorry.
Oh, it's a democracy. Commissioner Leonard?
Is there any appetite to have this come in front of us in a public hearing? Is that allowed? Is that a maneuver that can happen, or is it going straight from here to council?
We're following direction of city council.
Okay. Well, as I would say, Commissioner Jones, as citizens of Wilmington, if you want to express your concern or objections, that as a member of as a citizen, you could come up to the lectern at the city council meeting and express
Well, and I
those.
have tonight, and the ones that are concerned about it will listen, because I've heard from several that have listened to our meetings before. And I do think that, especially when it's been through us, in front of us 3 times, I think they're listening. And so that's
agree.
all we can ask for. I mean, they're, you know.
Commissioner Collier, anything?
Again, I put the courtyard development change in. I respect what you said. I don't have an issue with it going CZ. I mean, that's, you have a good argument. I wouldn't fight you on that part, no. But
And
I think I think some of the other things that are in here, most everything went to a conditional zoning in lieu of a few that are stayed special use permit. Some of the other Cs that were modified, I think they were practical modifications. May not be perfect, but I think they were practical modifications that probably should have been in the code to begin with that way, but they were not, so either we change it now or they all go to CZs and we move on. I mean, either way, I'll be fine with it.
Based on your, can I ask one question? So when this table of uses was established, do we know what year it was, or when it was?
2021.
2021, okay. Thank you.
Just to clarify, this is not my time. I just had a question on that question. But this wasn't really established. This was the pared down list from the previous list of 59.
I mean, the table of uses, the uses that are listed in the code was adopted with the new code. This is, this is the amendment that was voted on by this commission. And this is our reaction to what we heard from council.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was.
The list of uses themselves was established in 2021. How they were permitted is what we're discussing, so.
Okay.
You want? Sure. Go ahead.
First of all, Commissioner Jones, I'm happy to hear that someone other than my mother is watching tonight. I hope that's true. Not at all. Y'all know where I am on this. I think I made the comment at a meeting or two ago that I thought this is bad government because ironically, we started out, it was described to us as a process change. Well, the process by which we went around or tried to accomplish that process change, in my opinion, has been horrible. The original intent, as I understood it from the 4-hour meeting, was to make sure that the public had an opportunity to be heard. That's what I heard coming through consistently. And I don't think this does that. What does this do? This gives an opportunity for each side to have 10 minutes to talk at a CZ hearing versus a special use permit hearing. Okay, well, let's talk about that for a second. Candidly, I think the city attorney's office either didn't research this or gave bad advice to council, because I've talked to no less than a dozen attorneys in this market and outside the market, and to Commissioner Jones's point, there are a multitude of ways to conduct those hearings to provide the public an opportunity to speak. Ironically, the best one happens right next door, where the planning board hears the public in my words, in a dry run sort of situation, that I keep getting commission and board mixed up, but the board does not vote on, but they do have an opportunity to interact with the applicant and provide maybe some suggestions. Okay, that's a whole lot different than going in and changing a whole bunch of existing by right or use code tables. To me, that's a whole lot simpler, and that accomplishes the goal. I think the way that this was, in my words, essentially dumped on us in the immediate meeting following that council meeting, we didn't get the research, we didn't get the community participation, we didn't get the stakeholder participation until some of us up here screamed bloody murder. And I think it shouldn't have gone that way. I also believe that there's a big discrepancy hearing the city attorney talk about no legal exposure based on the current state statute of downzoning, prohibiting downzoning, when I've had very different conversations with a lot of other people. At the end of the day, one's a change in zoning and one's a permit. And so I made a note when that came up when Commissioner Kofer was talking, you're changing the underlying zoning of the property with the CZ, right?
No. If R20 allows it by CZ, it would be R20 with a CD. The underlying zoning would not change.
Okay, point taken. I'll back off of that. I still think there's a valid argument on the whole downzoning side. And my biggest problem with all of this is that I still don't see how this addresses the concern about making sure that the public has an opportunity to be heard. I make the point again, there's another government across the street that does it in a way that I think accomplishes that.
And part of our discussions, Commissioner Lennon, were around that process and the potential exposures that that process creates for the county from the following standpoint. Yes, they have a non-voting review, just effectively kind of what we're doing now, okay? The problem that it poses that the attorneys that I've talked to is that if any one of the commissioners, like some of our city council, dial into a planning board meeting and it's one of those meetings, who ensures that, and we're relying on the integrity of a lot of people, and I get that, and as we should, but if they have dialed into that review, they have to disclose that. I mean, it puts, the attorneys that I've talked to, it said, it creates an ex parte potential. Now, I'm not saying it's A to B and done.
And I understand that, but the counterpoint is I've also had conversations where there are municipalities and county governments that have SUP hearings where the public is permitted to testify, and the people voting it is explained that that is not testimony. So I think that goes back to my, and again, this is not about anybody, it's about, I don't feel like that was adequately researched. And surely I do not want the city to be the poster child for getting sued, nor do I want to take away a property owner's rights.
Where do you?
So I think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
On this one, my only other comment is, I think there's certain examples in here where, would you mind going back 2 slides, please? Or, I'm sorry, the 1 slide. I mean, it's ironic that the city council feedback, the first thing is keep special use permits as an option in the code. Okay. Keep critical community support uses as special uses. Example of the healing place. Reduce the number of uses requiring a special use permit. Get that. And special use permits that could be by right. Can you go back to what we're looking at tonight, please? So community support I struggle with because the whole community center thing, those were SUPs previously, right?
Yes, everything shaded on this table was
And I
is an SUP
apologize,
right
for
now.
some reason, my monitor shows it as a different color than
No,
everybody
everything
else's.
that's shaded in the table is currently an SUP,
No, his monitor here.
regardless of color.
Look at this one.
Okay,
Does that help?
So, but everything under community center, because if I'm reading the thing, it said that's permitted with conditional, well, wait a minute. This one said change from permitted with special use permit to permitted with conditional zoning, the handout we got.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So my question is, are we potentially eliminating the possibility of a community support? Would community center be considered part of community support?
I think, and anyone in here can correct me if I'm wrong, I think what the mayor was referring to was the healing place, those types of facilities that serve the community at large from a health standpoint or otherwise. And he used the healing place as an example because, given the nature of that use, it might not be something that folks would want in their neighborhood or in the area.
And that's
Community center is more of a recreation place for a neighborhood or something. I
which
think
arguably there are neighborhoods in the city that could really benefit from that. But, and I guess the other thing, and this is just me, but everything to the left being residential, the special use permits all went away. What was the thought process behind that?
Excuse me, say that again?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but everything everything to the left of the line
is residential.
Correct.
Okay. What was the thought process?
The thought process was those would be the uses in the areas where residents are impacted the most, and we wanted them to have their voice heard at those meetings.
Okay. I don't think we're there, but that's my opinion. And as Commissioner Jones said, we're not voting, but I think the process that got us to tonight, and God bless council at their next meeting. I don't know what they're going to do, but I don't think this gets us there. If the intent is to try and give the community an opportunity to speak, I don't know that changing this whole use table accomplishes that in any productive way. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner
Just
Collins.
one comment. I think from a standpoint of community input, they now have 2 portions, because now they've got to come to a public hearing here, and then they've got to go to a public hearing at the council. So I do think that direct community input to hear off this dais will be the same or more than what it is with an SUP. I understood Cameron Moore explain to us how the planning board does their I think he did call it a trial run meeting, and it sounds like it's a really good idea. I didn't have any issues with that at all. When we walked into our meeting, go back 1 slide, please, Brian, or maybe 2, one more. So this is what we walked in with, and this is what I did not vote for it, but this is what was given to us at the Planning Commission voted on as approval, that basically every S went to CZ. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's where we started. And that's what council sent back and said, is there any way to adjust it and not get rid of special use permits completely? That's where we came to 2 pages ahead, which is what kind of is in front of you now. And there was actually one before that. Everything that is, can you see the light green on your screens, everybody? So all those light greens were CZs, and those were the ones that we at least discussed, and could they be dealt with under prescribed conditions rather than going through either process. Maybe that's not the right decision. Maybe the right decision is leave it as CZ is the way we all approved it and we move on. But I didn't think that was right the day that we, again, because I didn't vote for it that night either, but 4-3 it went. So I guess my position in this is going into the meeting, my goal was to make the best out of what we had right then. That's what the will of this commission was to send that to council. So council sent it back and said, make modifications. So that's where we went. And John, I respect everything you just said because I agree with it. I want the public to be heard. I think they don't understand special use permits in general, the process. I don't know that it gets explained well enough. Do I think having another meeting by us ahead of time is a good idea? Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good idea to have it in that manner.
And let me interject. That was, we spent quite a bit of time talking about that as a potential change to our process as well. So that clearly, I don't want to lose sight of that because Commissioner Jones has brought it up. And, you know, it doesn't matter what the risk, there are risks to anything we do. The point being is that should be, in my opinion, part of when you present this, you know, to council in August, is that, you know, the potential of modifying our planning commission process to align somewhat with the county. So that was clearly a discussion point and a potential change from a process right there. So I'm sorry, Richard, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So you know, if there were items that our group discussed and decided to go from CZ to C, understanding that it is more than a process change. I agree with you on that. Most of them felt like they should be that way. I can respect the courtyard one, but the others to me they all made sense, and it stays any of them out of a public hearing. Again, that is different than a process change. I agree, but a lot of them are. I'm still not sure why the HD and HDMU we put C's on a community center. I don't remember, but they're there right this second. Anyways, I just wanted to make sure I understood what the goal was when we walked in. I didn't think it was I thought it was to take what we had sent forward, got sent back down, and make the best situation we could out of it, and I hope that's what we did. And we did have community input. There was one gentleman that came, I don't remember his name, but he was the guy that got up one night and told us we were all a bunch of idiots because we don't listen to anything. But when we talked with him and explained several of the points that he did not that he didn't understand them at all, but maybe they weren't quite clear, I think that his eyes were opened a little bit. And one of the gentlemen sitting next to me, I wish I knew both of their names, but I don't remember them. I was thrilled we had folks there that wanted to talk about it and have a discussion, you know. So I think the educational side of an SUE is where the biggest of our issues lies. It's not with who gets to speak or who doesn't get to speak. The ones that are getting frustrated is someone that's across town that is, you know, told they don't have standing. To me, if somebody lives close by and has an opinion, they should be able to stand up and say it. But that doesn't mean it's relevant. Doesn't mean it's exactly right. I liked the SUP process. I don't think it needs to go away. I think there is some changes that can occur. I agree with, I believe Commissioner Kofer said it too. I mean, we're changing it from a permitted use to a zoning change. Maybe it's not changing the underlying, but it's taking it from something that could expire in 24 months. Is that right? If it's not used?
I believe so, yes. I believe it's 2 years.
Okay. To something that runs in perpetuity with the land unless you ask for a change. So from the public's perspective, now they get 2 shots at public hearings. good, bad, or indifferent. I think that is the biggest of the change that I see. But going from a permitted use to a zoning change are two different things. And that's the part of why I think, to me, we should keep SUPs in place.
Anybody else?
Can I have a response to something that Richard said? So,
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
back to the community hearing and hearing the community, I'm all about that. I think it's great to hear what people think, because sometimes they may have an idea that we hadn't thought about. But when I was at River Lights, I had a lady get up and scream at me in a meeting and cuss me out because her son couldn't ride his four-wheeler on that 1,400 acres again. And that's her right to get up and speak it. But if council wants to come to those, or whoever doesn't think the community's being heard, they're being heard. And the community meetings can get much nastier than anything we experience in here. I had one in Brunswick County last night. Yeah. And if we need to have another community hearing, or if it's about, I've been through an SUP with the county, with going in front of the planning board, and you're hearing what all the community people think, and we're listening. They may have ideas that we hadn't thought about, or things that we can tweak on a plan. Then, in that scenario, the planning board's not voting, but they can give advice. Hey, you need to look at this, you need to look at that. And that's what the whole process of development is about. It's not that anybody, well, there may be some that want to do harm, but you know, the perception of our community is that people are out for the bottom dollar, and they're not. We're growing. We need homes. We need services. We need lots of stuff. But I don't think at this point you take away, and if the main thing that I've heard is the community being heard. Whoever wants to come to a community hearing, I'd love to have some people there. Or if we need to do the process, what the county does, and if it's about being heard. But that's, I just think things have changed so much, and, you know, I know Wilmington is not what it was when I moved here before 40 came in, and it's changed a lot over the last 30 years. It's going to change more. People want to be here. So we've got to figure out a balance too.
And those are valid points. I think the thing that we would all agree on, I would hope, is that we're kind of in somewhat uncharted ground here, where we've, been asked to, we've been given a homework assignment, and we're, trying to work our way through it. And I'd like to think we're at a point where, we've served something up to council, it's come back, we've reviewed a piece of staff work, we've had a group together. I mean, it's like I told them last night. It's going to come back to you, and you guys need to make a decision. Is my personal opinion. I mean, and again, I'll reiterate: you can either look at what's here and say, right, wrong, or indifferent. This is they vote 7-0, move on, or they have a discussion, which could be a long discussion, about, well, let's change this, which they have done with many legislative things that come out of the Planning Commission. They change conditions, right there on the fly. That's certainly a possibility. Or they can go look at, where we started and say, you know what, this is getting too complex. The heck with it, and let's just keep it the way it is right now and be done with it. And I really think it's kind of those three options, but it's, I just don't know constructively how, what we can do to keep kicking this thing around. I mean, it is kind of where I'm at. I respect everything that's been said by my peer commissioners. I absolutely do. Because this is not a right or wrong. These are opinions. These are facts based on experiences, based on, what people do for a living, and that's why we're together as a group. Okay? because we come from such varied backgrounds, and that's what makes this work. So I just, short of I mean, my recommendation is, we're discussing this, you guys are taking notes, you being the staff, you're listening to this, and that's going to have to shape your presentation in August. I mean, you heard a lot of things here. I'm not sure you've heard, revolutionary new things, but you're hearing consistent, concerns. We did talk about in the work group about the changing the planning commission process to, so you have a legislative pre-hearing around a potential judicial hearing. We've talked about that. That's a possibility, but I think we need to move on, is just my opinion. And then let's figure it out, because we could sit here till the cows come home picking this thing apart and, not getting to where we need to get to, which is to, fulfill what we were asked to do, which was look at this, come back to the council. And it's up to them. It's going to be their decision. It was always going to be their decision. Commissioner Lennon.
And I appreciate that. I think my hope is that they realize that there was not uniform agreement amongst us seven, which that's not bad. That's good, right? That's part of why we do this. So, because I do think there are just so many unanswered questions about it. I do think, if anybody else is listening, I know Councilwoman Andrews has said this a lot before about information to the public on the website, and she's made some great points about that. There have been two examples recently of the military cutoff in Eastwood flyover and the Galleria, of projects that were approved in one case almost 10 years ago, and the Galleria was what, 18, Brian?
The first rezoning for a Galleria occurred in 2014.
2014, okay.
Yes, sir.
So 11 years ago. And the first thing it made me think about was Greenville Loop and Oleander that we approved a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and probably is not going to happen for another 3 to 4 to 5 years. If there was some way that people understood, I don't know. I think what happens here and what happens at council, and maybe it's on the media, they tend to only focus on things, but when the media is covering meetings of the public about projects that have, like, where was everybody 11 years ago? I mean, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think that's how you really get at educating the public. I'm all about the public participation, but I'm also all about the public taking the responsibility to be educated on what the issues are and what the current situations are. So, and Mr. Chair, just if I may, I'm sorry, this is the last thing.
Go ahead.
I did forget, I did have a question in regards to the Galleria, but this is not the appropriate time, but if I could.
Oh, before we adjourn?
Yes, sir.
No, that's fair.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Kofer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last one, I apologize for being the one to belabor this, and I certainly didn't expect to find myself here. But my opinion of this advisory board is a think tank. You volunteer as a think tank.
I got it.
You volunteer your time to simply be used as a tool when in the process. And occasionally, we are charged with the task of an exercise that's sent down by council, and they're using us as a tool in their toolbox. There's several things that have come up now that we've gone from changing SUPs to CZs, in my personal opinion. One, there's three things I'll bring up. One, we're leaving SUP in the table of uses, which is fine. That's at council's direction. Does Wilmington have a definition of standing?
State definition, isn't it? State legal. Mike, isn't it a state legal definition? Yeah, I can't hear.
I'm sorry, statutory criteria, and there is case law about it, and I think we also have specific provisions in the code about abutters and the distance and that sort of thing.
Like a radius, distance.
Yeah,
It's generally adjoining property owners.
But is it also safe to assume that if you ask 100 lawyers, you'll get 30 different opinions? I'm being silly, but not really.
Well, I mean, things are always subject to interpretation, special damage, that sort of thing. Distance requirements are pretty straightforward, but, and if it gets to the level of council, it is council's determination as to whether or not the party has standing in that quasi-judicial proceeding. And if you watched the Holly Tree, that was one of the more time-consuming parts of that hearing, but a necessary part of it.
Thank you.
So statutory definition of standing, but at the same time, council has more discretion than that definition?
I wouldn't say discretion. They're the ultimate determining body in a quasi-judicial context that comes before them.
Okay, thank you. The reason I bring that up is because what we were talking about was going away from SUP to CZ. At their request, SUP is going to be left in there, but during some of our debate, standing kept coming up. Who has standing? Well, in that particular example, certain people may have wanted to speak, but they didn't have standing. So I just wanted to clarify that we do have a definition that the city utilizes, but the end-all be-all is that council can decide who has standing. So from a public perspective, I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's a case closed on standing. And SUP is still in the table, so check. The second thing I would bring up is what happens in the event an SUP is changed to CZ or C, and one of those business owners or owners wants to expand or amend their existing SUP, saying this gets approved.
I believe an existing SUP would just be grandfathered to whatever code was in place at that time.
So those SUPs...
They would get what's called permit choice. If a code changes after a decision is made, they can choose to go with the new code or stick with the code that was in place at that time. And
Okay.
So if it was an SUP was approved in 91, they would have the ability to go back to the code that was in place and those conditions that were attached to that permit at that time. Generally, the conditions and the code changes that are made throughout time can favor that property owner, so they might want to change to the new code or whatever code's
Right.
on the books at that point.
So at the time the adoption's made, those SUPs are grandfathered, for my lay way of saying it, explaining it to myself.
Right.
If they want to amend it, consider it as a non-conforming use in some ways because it's grandfathered under an SUP. If they want to amend it, expand it, do something with that SUP, is it kind of just concrete or?
If they want to change anything and not comply with the specific provisions of that permit, they would have to comply with the new code. That's the choice they're making.
And whatever that table is, if it's C or CZ at that time?
Correct.
Right, okay. And then third and finally, coming into this blind without having been at that workshop, seeing us go from SUP to CZ, now SUP to C, permitted by right with conditions. You've already explained that those conditions were pre-drafted, pre-written while the table was S for SUP. Those conditions exist today for SUP, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you feel like those conditions are satisfactory once you go away from a quasi-judicial special use hearing to a staff level unilateral approval process? Are you comfortable with the conditions as they exist today? Because they're existing today, in my opinion, for an SUP process versus a staff level. Do you think those need to be reviewed, added to, or studied?
The ones that we recommended that go by right with prescribed conditions, we made that recommendation based on the conditions that are in place for that particular use. How those uses are permitted in other districts, does it make sense? I'll point out assisted living residents, this one it was by right with prescribed conditions in every single residential district. Why would you do that in the other districts? So it made sense for it to be similar to those. Another one would be the wireless telecommunications facilities. Every single district allows it with prescribed conditions except CBD. To us, the conditions in place protect the public interest in those uses And it's not necessary to have any type of review of that, because it's consistent with all the other districts, and it's the uses conditions in the code are adequate. And again, this is just our recommendation, so that's just staff's opinion on that.
And I appreciate that response, because I think that at the end of the day, staff would be responsible for enforcing those conditions and it just being comfortable with them. Going away from a special use hearing where new conditions could be made based on those withstanding, based on council's discretion, based on all kinds of things. I mean, when we first started studying this, I was absolutely floored at the amount of the by right conditional approvals Wilmington allows their property owners, stakeholders, and residents. It's overwhelming to be this small of a list. But nevertheless, last question would be, are you in agreement that courtyard development of R15 should be C or CZ?
Our recommendation before the working group was CZ.
CZ, okay. Thank you, Brian.
Let me go around the table one more time. Ace, thank you. Commissioner Collier, anything? Commissioner Adams? Commissioner Lennon? Commissioner Woodruff?
Nothing new, but I haven't said any word yet. We've done our job. It's back to city council. I mean, everything tonight, I swear, was said whenever we met the last time, and we had to come back this time. It's all on the table. It's up to them. We don't need a vote here. We're not asked for a vote. We did that once before. Like I say, I think the opinions are out there. I pity the council that has to sit and listen to this one again. They know what they want. We're presenting as much as we can by information, by votes, by charts. It's time to, as Jack said, put this one to bed. The only one point I do that Ace brought up, the thing about the courtyard development and what staff might have recommended there, that's something new. Everything else is what they've asked us to do, we've done, and I think they don't need to look at us anymore. It's time to get it done.
Commissioner Jones, anything else? You good? Okay. I think this discussion is concluded. You've heard thoughts, comments, suggestions, based on what you've shown here. So, you've got, what, a couple weeks before you to kind of prepare your presentation and that for city council. What is it, August 3rd, 4th, whatever the date is?
August 5th. For
August
those
5th.
listening, this will be August 5th.
August 5th. Are you sure about that, Brian? August 5th?
If I'm not, we're in trouble.
Yeah. So, okay. So, any more questions you have of us? Are you?
The feedback I heard was there's kind of some back and forth on the courtyard, and we want to present the opinion that they should consider bringing this commission back into an advisory role in the special use permits. Is that fair?
Similar to what the
Right.
county does.
We would use the county as an example.
Yeah. Okay.
And just that was what came out of this discussion.
I think that makes sense. Is that everybody got, yeah?
You said you were going to present CZ under courtyard. Is that what I heard you say or not?
I want to take forward what's coming out of the working group, but I've heard a lot of discussion tonight about that being a CZ.
Well, since I said it in the working group, I take mine back and just put it as CZ, because I think that would be the will of everyone here, unless I'm mistaken.
No, I have no particular feeling one way or the other on it, to be honest with you, so.
Again, to me, courtyard has a whole lot of protections in it, whether it's R15 or not. However, that is a dramatic change, more so than some of the others that we were talking about.
Staff had that as a CZ because
Understood.
it is a different development pattern that may be more disruptive in a low-density, homogeneous kind of zoned area where you've got neighborhoods that are all equal lot size, it's all laid out. Adding this to it may not be appropriate in some R15 areas, and it may be appropriate in others.
But it's also consistent with the city's push to increase density and provide additional housing. So I'm in favor of leaving it, but I know we're not voting, so. Leaving it as C, yeah.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just one thing, Brian, because we haven't made a vote, you don't know, I mean, you've heard our comments, but I don't know if you know exactly where everybody lands. Commissioner Pollock and I, or Chairman Pollock and I, were able to sit down at Wrightsville Beach and talk to them after that initial meeting to get a better understanding of 160B and the ramifications that the state's putting on the municipalities. You know, I am in favor of the conditional zoning process. The town attorney down there is Grady, who came in front of us at one point. He's vetted it. They hired a consultant to study it. I think with the legal argument that, you know, there's so much coming out of UNC School of Governance on how the municipalities are protected. I won't bore you with that because you guys wrote the book on it, I'm sure, and understand it better than I do. But I'm not in favor of what the county's doing. I think that they are setting themselves up for litigation, and based on my lay understanding of process. And I think that the city's moving in the right direction with this, with conditional zoning. So I support CZ over the SUP process, just making myself clear there.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. On this or a different? Oh, I was going to go to other items, yeah. So we're kind of in between items from the commission, items from the staff. So I think let me finish with the items from the staff and go in reverse order. So Linda, you had some things.
Yes, so just an announcement that, City Council met last night. They considered the two rezonings, general rezonings on Market Street that you heard at your last meeting. They approved both of those, one for Nourish and C, and one for the change from O&I to CB. That Dave Spatrino brought forward. The other item that we have for you is that we think we have closed in on a date for a joint workshop with the Planning Commission and City Council to discuss the draft Greater Downtown Plan, which will be distributed to both groups before that meeting for review. We're looking at the morning of August 18th, immediately after the council briefing. I don't have a specific time. We'll be working with the city clerk on that. They do have to notice that as a time specific, even if it's after the council meeting. So, but I would say their briefings typically start at 8:30, so you can expect it after that. We have asked for a 4-hour window, and that really comes out of the initial briefing we did for council when we focused on the high-level strategies for each of the 4 themes. There was a lot of interest and a lot of questions and digging in, and we were not presenting kind of the actions and recommendations that were nested under those strategies. So we have come back with this. If we can do the entire thing in this 4-hour meeting, that would be wonderful. We have also, talked to our deputy city manager and said this may, depending on how much everyone wants to dig into every action and strategy, there may be a second 4-hour workshop that comes our way. So we're going to play it by ear that day. But again, we'll be sending the plan out in advance for everyone to read so that you have it before you come into the meeting. You're not going to be coming in cold and seeing the themes, the strategies, and the actions that morning.
Okay. Anything else from staff? Okay, let's go back to items from the commission. I'll start on my right. Commissioner Lennon.
I just had a quick question. There was a gentleman who spoke last night, and there's been a lot of stuff on social media about the Galleria, and one of the things they're saying is that the TIA that was done, and they referenced a whole bunch of things that it didn't take into account. And I'm just curious if in staff's opinion, that's accurate or not. Some of it should not be taken into account, like upcoming roadway projects, which are never taken into account in a TIA. But any comments? I just wanted to see if that was accurate or not.
We can't speak authoritatively on the TIA process because it's really not our process. It's something that's managed by the Wilmington Metropolitan Planning Organization. They do have procedures they have to follow. They have to include growth projections. They have to account for approved projects when it's done. I can't speak beyond that. We would probably need to get a traffic engineer in here or somebody from that organization to kind of speak to the nuts and bolts of that TIA. But they do account for the growth of the area. They have to use a percentage of growth, and they have to account for what's been approved. I don't know how far back they have to go. Again, that's the breadth of my knowledge on that, and I don't want to.
Because the comment was the TIA, I believe, was 2022. And
I
they,
believe they might have taken counts, traffic counts in '22.
okay,
And there was some discussion about what time of year those counts are most appropriate. The TIA itself, I believe, was originally approved in '23 and then modified when the current owner modified that plan. But the TIA it's been in place for, I believe, a couple years.
so it's a little bit of a loaded question, because, I mean, back to my education piece, there's organic growth, there's stuff that's papered, in other words, pending projects that have to be taken into account. There's all kinds of things. Somewhere we need to figure out how to communicate that that's part of the process that we go through here. Because I think the gentleman was very well spoken, and I agree with a lot of what he said about it. But if there's inaccuracies coming up like that in public that people are taking as fact, I think that doesn't help any of us. So I don't know the answer, but I think somehow to overcome
I will
that.
say this, that planning staff is willing to schedule a meeting to discuss any of these projects or any issues in general at any time. So contact staff and we'll sit down. And we met with a group from the Gallery of Watch
Yeah, no,
folks.
I know, and I think that
So
was very helpful.
If anything comes up, we're always more than happy to sit down and discuss their questions.
Okay, thanks.
John, you're a great street person, because I have a question that kind of goes to the same project, but it's a little different. I mean, obviously, a big, right or wrong, a public festoche about the trees. So, got it, okay? A lot of statements made, plus, that this is what it is, no, this is what it is. So, you got a lot of opinions, and I for one, have not been able yet to settle on what is fact, what is opinion. I'm still learning on that one. But here's my question. The issue came up because, allegation, if I think I have this right, trees were cut down that shouldn't have been cut down. Right or wrong, that was the issue. My question is, when you have a commercial development like that, and clearly in the, they come before us, if they're, use code changes required, that's done. Plan, then they sit down with the TRC and walk through all the parameters, and that's multi-meeting process. Is there any point when it says, wait a minute, and let's just use Galleria, because it's okay, hey, they're getting ready, or we know, or we know they're getting ready to go to the tree cutting. Is there any in-project touchback with the development team that says, hey, let's just walk through the trees, one more time? And I bring that up for two reasons. One, just because of the issue that came up, but the other thing I'm kind of sensitive to is, last numbers I saw was, our tree canopy in a city that's supposed to be a city of trees is, over the last few years, is down about 6-7 percentage points. And I'm just thinking, how do we ensure that that we hold people to what the plan was in terms of trees? Because it's easy to ask forgiveness later than to enforce permission. So is there any process like that in place, or?
We have pre-construction meetings on site with every single project. And in the case of Galleria, that's when we uncovered that there were several trees that weren't on their tree survey. And that's why they got a stop work order to identify those trees and account for them in the approval. That process worked that time.
Okay. All right, I asked the question because, we all have friends and all get asked questions just because of what we're privy to. So that's helpful to be able to know what the reality is, to communicate that back. So that was kind of my item from the staff. And so Commissioner Lennon's about to correct me.
No, I just wanted to, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said trees were cut down that shouldn't have been cut down.
The perception.
The perception.
The perception.
Okay, because it was a perception, right, Brian? Because they were doing it based on the old code that.
They're compliant with the code that was in
Right.
place when they got approved. Yes, sir.
Okay, which is different than saying I agree with it, but
And it's a fair point.
that wasn't for you, that was for my mom.
And again, I brought the whole thing, perception. And perception's reality until you change perception. So, any other items from the commission? Not to my right, to Commissioner Collier.
So last night, they graduated the first Wilmington 101 class, which I think is a great step for the city in getting some of the education out. We have Leadership Wilmington that does some of the same things. So I'll give a shout out to Councilman Celeste Andrews, because she spearheaded getting that going. And I think it can be a great program. I hope there's people watching that are interested enough in the city that they will take part in it. I did see that the applications are closed right now because I guess they've had too many applications, which is a great thing. So anyways, I think it's a great program. I think the educational part of what we can give the public helps all of us in what we do, and hopefully folks get something out of it and better understand the rules and regulations as we have to apply them. So I thought she did a really nice job with that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else? Anything else from the staff? Commissioner Adams, from the commission.
Very likely you guys won't see me at the August meeting. I have a surgery coming up a couple days in advance of that, so I'll probably be in recovery. I hate I might miss the final Thalian Hall meeting if that ends up being true, so.
Okay, thanks for the warning. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.